Have you ever noticed this? The more you compare yourself to others, the harder it becomes to think clearly. You open social media, and suddenly your mood drops for no clear reason. You feel a strange, restless feeling inside you. Not sadness exactly, just unease. Slowly, without realizing it, you start making choices not based on what you want, but on what others might think, what it will look like, how it will be judged. So here's the real question. What if comparison isn't just affecting how you feel? What if it's quietly changing how your brain works? And once you see it, you will understand better. Chapter 1. Why comparison feels so normal. At first, comparison feels harmless. You look around yourself, what other people are doing. You look at your phone. You check where you stand. You tell yourself, it's just life. I'm just looking. So, it must be fine. But here's the part most people don't realize. Your brain does not treat comparison as neutral information. It treats it as a signal about survival. Your brain isn't asking, is this useful? It's asking, am I falling behind? And that single question, asked quietly in the background, begins to change how you think. Your focus narrows, your thinking shifts, your decisions become reactive. You don't notice it happening, but from that moment on, your brain is no longer trying to build, it's trying to protect. Chapter 2. What happens in the brain when you compare? When you compare yourself to someone who seems to be doing better than you, your brain does not process it as inspiration. It processes it as a signal that something about your position might be at risk. Deep inside your brain, areas linked to fear and vigilance begin to activate. Not panic, not anxiety you can name, just alertness. Why does this happen? Because for most of human history, social position was not about identity, it was about survival. If you fell behind the group, you lost protection, you lost access to food, you lost status, and status meant safety. Your brain has not updated this software. It still reacts to social comparison as if you were standing in a tribe, watching others move ahead while you fall back. So the moment comparison starts, several things happen quietly. Stress hormones increase, not enough for you to feel afraid, but enough to change how your brain operates. Attention narrows. Your mind stops exploring. It starts scanning. Instead of thinking deeply, you begin monitoring yourself. Your brain shifts into defense mode. And defense mode is not stupid, it's efficient. But it's designed for short-term survival, not long-term thinking. That's why you don't feel scared. You feel distracted, restless, unable to settle into one clear thought. Your brain isn't trying to solve problems anymore. It's trying to make sure you don't fall behind. Chapter 3. Why comparison makes thinking worse. This part matters more than most people realize. Clear thinking is not about being smart. It's about having enough mental space to focus on one thing at a time. Your brain works best when attention is narrow and deliberate, when one question is allowed to exist fully without interruption. But comparison does the opposite. It fills that mental space with noise. Not loud noise, subtle noise, the kind that feels like thinking but produces nothing. Your mind starts running background processes you never consciously approved. What does this mean about me? Am I behind? Should I change my plan? Am I wasting time? Did I start too late? Did I choose the wrong path? Pause here. None of these questions move you forward. They don't lead to decisions. They don't lead to action. They just keep the brain busy. And a busy brain feels productive, even when it's stuck. Here's the part most people miss. Your brain has limited working memory. Think of it like a single-lane road. When comparison enters, it doesn't stop traffic, it adds extra vehicles, self-judgment, hypothetical futures, imagined opinions, alternative lives. Now everything slows down. This is why after scrolling or comparing, simple tasks suddenly feel hard. Not because they are hard, but because your mental bandwidth is already used up. You're not thinking about something specific anymore. You're thinking in too many directions at once. Your attention keeps jumping. Your thoughts never land. Your mind never fully commits. And intelligence needs commitment. Pattern recognition requires stillness. Problem solving requires patience. Creative insight requires silence. Comparison removes all three, so your thinking becomes shallow. Not stupid in ability, stupid in execution. Let me say that again. Comparison doesn't lower your IQ, it lowers your usable intelligence. It keeps your brain in evaluation mode instead of creation mode. And in evaluation mode, nothing meaningful gets built. That's why after long periods of comparison, people feel mentally exhausted, but strangely unfulfilled. They spent energy, but they produced nothing. That's the hidden cognitive cost, and most people never realize what's draining them. Chapter 4. The Illusion of Productivity. Now something strange starts to happen. After comparison, people rarely stop. They don't shut down. They don't stop. They become busy. They open new tabs. They make new plans. They rewrite goals that were already clear. They consume more videos, more advice, more strategies. From the outside, it looks like effort. From the inside, it feels responsible. This is not progress. This is the brain trying to escape discomfort. Let's be honest for a moment. Real progress is quiet. It feels uncertain. It often feels boring at the beginning. You work without feedback. You move without applause. You spend long stretches being bad at something before you get better. And comparison makes that unbearable. Because when you compare, you are suddenly aware of outcomes. You see how far others seem to be. You feel behind. You feel exposed. So the brain looks for relief. Instead of doing the hard, unclear work, it chooses visible motion. Planning feels safe. Learning feels productive. Optimizing feels intelligent. Pause here. You're moving, but you're not committing. This is why comparison-driven productivity feels exhausting and empty. You burn energy without building momentum. Your brain stays active, but your life stays the same. That's productivity theater. It looks like work, it sounds like ambition, but nothing real is being built. And the longer you stay there, the harder it becomes to return to actual progress. Chapter 5. Why modern life supercharges this problem. Your brain evolved in a very different world. For most of human history, you compared yourself to a small group of people, a village, a tribe, a few familiar faces you saw every day. You knew their strengths, you knew their weaknesses, you understood the context of their lives. So comparison had limits. That world no longer exists. Today, before breakfast, you can compare yourself to thousands of people. People from different countries, different ages, different opportunities, different timelines. Here's the problem. Your brain does not know any of this. It does not understand context. It does not calculate background advantages. It does not adjust for edited highlights or selective sharing. Your brain treats every comparison as real and relevant. So when you see someone succeed faster, your nervous system reads it as a signal that says, you are behind, you might lose status, you might fall out of the group. For an ancient brain, it's dangerous. So it responds the only way it knows how, by activating stress. Not panic, not fear, just a constant low-level tension. You don't feel threatened, you feel restless, distracted, uneasy for no clear reason. And here's what it does. A slightly stressed nervous system cannot think deeply. Deep thinking requires safety. Reflection requires calm. Creativity requires mental space. But stress narrows attention. It pushes the brain into short-term mode. This is what happens next. You start reacting instead of choosing. You copy instead of creating. You chase instead of building. Not because you are weak, because your brain believes it is competing in a race that never ends. And that's how modern life quietly turns comparison into a cognitive overload machine. Chapter 6. Comparison attacks identity first. Here's the part most people miss. Comparison does not start by hurting your results. It starts by changing how you see yourself. At first, nothing looks bad. You are still working, you are still trying, you are still showing up. But something subtle shifts. Instead of asking, what matters to me? What do I want to build? What kind of person do I want to become? You start asking a different set of questions. How do I compare to others? Am I ahead or behind? Does this look successful enough? This shift is small, but it is dangerous because identity is supposed to be internal. When identity comes from inside, your actions have direction. You know why you are doing something, even when it is hard, slow, or boring. But when identity becomes external, your direction dissolves. You begin adjusting yourself to signals. More likes, more recognition, more visible progress. External signals change constantly, so your motivation becomes unstable. One day you feel driven, the next you feel behind. Not because your goals changed, but because your reference point did. You start working harder, but with less clarity. You do more, but it feels emptier, because effort without identity feels like motion without meaning. Here's the real cost. When identity is unclear, your brain cannot prioritize. Everything feels important. Nothing feels essential. So you chase momentum instead of direction. And over time, you don't burn out from effort. You burn out from confusion. Because direction always disappears before effort does. Chapter 7. Why Smarter People Suffer More from Comparison. This sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. Smarter minds often suffer more from comparison, not less. At first, this feels unfair. You would expect intelligence to protect people from mental traps, but intelligence actually gives the mind more tools to trap itself. Let's slow this down. A sharp mind doesn't just see one outcome, it sees 10. It imagines what could happen if things go right, and it imagines what could happen if things go wrong. Then it imagines how others might judge each outcome. That ability is powerful, but without boundaries, it becomes noise. Pause for a moment. When a smart person compares themselves to someone else, they don't just notice the gap. They explain it. They analyze it. They replay past decisions. They simulate alternate timelines where they chose differently. Their brain starts running parallel realities, and every reality competes for attention. This creates mental congestion, not confusion, congestion, like too many tabs open in a browser. Nothing crashes, but everything slows down. Here's the part most people miss. Intelligence increases sensitivity to status, timing, and opportunity. Smart people notice patterns faster. They see trajectories earlier. They detect risks sooner. So when comparison enters the picture, it doesn't feel emotional. It feels logical. I should be further ahead. I miscalculated. I need to rethink everything. But logic without action becomes paralysis. This is how intelligence turns inward. Instead of solving problems in the world, the mind starts solving problems about itself. And that's where overthinking replaces action.
Not because the person lacks discipline, but because their mind is overloaded with possibilities. Watch what happens next. Without systems to protect focus, the smart mind keeps revisiting the same questions. What should I change? What if I'm wrong again? What's the optimal move? Action feels risky. Thinking feels safe. So the mind keeps thinking, and comparison keeps feeding it new material. That's why smart people don't fail loudly. They stall quietly.
Chapter 8. The real fix, and it's not positive thinking. Let's be clear about one thing first. You cannot stop comparison. If someone tells you to just stop comparing, they don't understand the human brain. Comparison is automatic. It's fast. It's ancient. So trying to remove it only creates frustration. The goal is never to eliminate comparison. The goal is to reduce the power it has over your thinking. And that doesn't happen through motivation. It happens through better questions. Here's what most people do. They notice comparison. Then they argue with themselves. They say things like, I shouldn't feel this way. I should be more confident. I should stop caring. But the brain doesn't respond to lectures. It responds to structure. Instead of fighting the thought, you redirect the system that feeds it. Comparison usually asks one question on repeat. Where do I stand compared to them? That question automatically activates threat because your brain hears ranking, judgment, survival, status. So the fix is not emotional, it's architectural. You replace that question with one your brain can answer calmly. Instead of asking, am I ahead of them? You ask, did I act according to my system today? That single shift changes everything. Here's why this works. A system is internal. It is repeatable. It does not depend on anyone else's progress. When you judge yourself by systems, the goal becomes simple. Show up, do the next small action, and trust the process you've chosen. Your brain no longer needs to scan the environment. Watch closely. Threat mode turns off. Focus turns on. Working memory improves. Decisions feel lighter. Thinking becomes clearer. This is not mindset. This is neuroscience responding to certainty. Now notice something important. A system doesn't promise results today. It promises direction. And the brain prefers direction over comparison because direction reduces uncertainty. That's why people with clear routines feel calmer, even when their results are still small. Here's the hidden benefit. When you measure yourself by systems, comparison loses urgency. You may still notice others, but it no longer controls your mood, your energy, and your self-worth. This is the real win. Not confidence, not motivation, cognitive freedom. So the fix isn't thinking positively. It's about focusing only on what you can do right now. One day, one action, one system. When you do that consistently, comparison becomes background noise, and your intelligence comes back online. Conclusion. Comparison doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects how well you think. When your mind is busy measuring itself against others, it loses clarity, direction, and depth. But when you shift your focus to systems, to small actions, to what you can control today, your brain relaxes. Thinking becomes simpler. Decisions become lighter. And progress becomes possible again. Pause. Breathe. Reset your focus before the world decides it for you.